And we hadn't even reached the Sahara yet, and everything was already starting to fall to bits. It was a real worry, man, a bit of a worry. The other thing was that the van began to split further, where those pieces of timber were, you know, down on the side of the van. There was two pieces of timber. Well, it started to split further, and a gap started to open up in the bodywork again, a worse one. Oh my goodness. So anyway, the way we supposedly solved these were, for the suspension, we had to find a couple of heavy duty shock absorbers in the town of Chpt, and that was going to be a big ask. Shock absorbers would take the pressure off the springs and spread the load a bit more, so that was the idea of that. And a flat piece of steel so that we could bracket the van together so it wouldn't break in half. We had to find a piece of steel that would do that job, and that would hold the van together, hopefully. And as you can see here in this picture, the split in the bodywork and the steel bracket that we did find to hold it together, piece of steel we found, bolted it together. For the suspension, as I said, we had to go and find two heavy shock absorbers in the little town of Chpt, which was not going to be easy. And there was just no way we were going to find combi shocks way out there. So after much searching, we did find a couple of heavy-duty Mercedes shock absorbers. Most all the vehicles around this part of the world in the late 1960s, early 70s were Mercedes, because Algeria was a former French colony up until just about 10 years ago, and the French influence was understandably still very massive in Algeria. However, the Mercedes that the locals drove around in was a very, very substandard version of the Mercedes that we were used to. They were just heaps, really, second-rate vehicles. And so the only answer was to modify a Mercedes shock absorber and fit it to the combi, which all up, the repairs probably took about a day and a half. And we haven't really started our journey yet, so to speak. The other extremely frustrating thing was that the cost of the shock absorbers out here was astronomical. They just screwed us down, man, because I knew we needed them, and it cost us $100 US for two shock absorbers. Well, we had to have them, which left us with just $1,100 US, and we still had more than 20,000 kilometers to go. We figured now we would probably need all of that money just for fuel. So any sort of other spending was virtually now over. However, it had been mentioned to us was that if you exchange US dollars on the black market, the local currency, you can actually come out a winner sometimes. So that was mentioned to us. Whatever exchanging money on the black market meant, we had no idea, but it was mentioned to us. The funny thing was, at this point, common sense was saying to us, you're running out of money, the underpowered 25 horsepower two-wheel drive combi's falling apart, we've got nobody to travel with, no convoy, no compass because we couldn't find a compass, so what on earth are we doing? And you know, a large portion of the route that we're about to take across the Sahara is going to be the same route that nearly a decade away there would be the inauguration Paris to Dakar rally. Same route. So we're virtually doing the Paris to Dakar rally close on a decade before its inauguration. And incidentally, the first Paris to Dakar rally that they did, more or less 10 years away from when we did it, out of 182 entrants, 108 of them didn't make it on the first rally at its inception. And it was pronounced as the most grueling, hostile and unhospitable rally terrain in the world, according to all the worldwide media. vehicles were lost, large-scale aerial searches had to be mounted, and they generally had to have up to 5 backup vehicles, so they were pretty well looked after. But up to at least 30 people had been killed on the rally, and a number have been murdered by terrorists and bandits. So even a decade later, a decade after we did it, it was still very hostile and a very dangerous environment, wasn't it? But there would be no support vehicle for us. And as they wouldn't have to do, we would have to do, we would be required to sign a Trans-Sahara authorization at the remote Algerian border post, stating that there would be no search party should we not reach the other end, no aerial search for us. We would sign a document saying we're not looking for you if you get lost. So then why are we still aiming towards crossing the Sahara and drive 20,000 kilometres to Cape Town if everything seems to be suggesting the opposite? Why are we still doing it? Why would you put yourself at such risk? We were young, weren't we? Well, the answer to that is really, why would someone want to surf 25-foot ship sterns in Chpt, huge monstrous waves? Why would anybody do that? Well, why would someone want to do extreme mountain climbing, extreme skateboarding, extreme base jumping, the Paris to Dakar rally, where 30 people have been killed? Why would you want to do it? Skydiving, mountain biking. Oh my goodness, why? Well, I think you know the answer as much as I do, don't you? Because that's what you want to do when you're 20 or 30 or 15. You just want to test your capabilities. You want to see if you can do it, don't you? You just want to see if you can do it. I bet you're just the same in your particular area. You want to test yourself to see if you can do it. You want to have an on-the-edge experience, don't you? Some people do it in business, put themselves at risk. Others in precarious aid programs. Being a parent, that's pretty scary. And many of us were no different back then in the boomer generation. We just wanted to experience extreme adventure just like you do. So turning back for us now was just unthinkable after going through all that we've just been through. We survived up till now, so we couldn't see any reason why we couldn't survive tomorrow as well, and the next day and the next day. The reason why we were so determined to push on, to keep moving ahead, is because we're just like you. We wanted adventure, and we were going to have our adventure. And so on the 18th of October 1972, Paula's birthday, we left our last hint of town-like civilization, knowing that only 2 small outposts remain now between us and the mighty Sahara. And the Algerians were still in the process of making roads at that time in northern Sahara, in the northern area of the Sahara, and we knew that this would be the last sign of any established road that we would see for the next nearly 2,000 kilometres. And even what they were making here was very brutal and narrow roads, as you can see. They were just making the roads at this point, and it was, oh man, they were pretty brutal roads. And remember, this was the time frame when only just a couple of years before man had just landed on the moon. This is a long time ago. Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. The Vietnam War was still raging. It was a very pivotal and revolutionary time in history. The Cold War was still at its height, communism versus capitalism. Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution was still at its height. Civil War and revolution was again also at its height in many of the African countries too, like I had mentioned all this before, who were fighting for independence and colonialism, dealing with colonialism. It was vehemently despised, colonialism. So that was all happening. So as well as heading towards a barren and hostile terrain, we were heading towards many unknowns in regard to potentially hostile African political climates as well. So anyway, at this point we thought we figured it was time to turn the shortwave radio on and get that into action and tune in and find out if there's any hostile activities taking place in the other African countries. So we briefly had a listen on the radio, because like I say, we needed to know what was going on in those African countries that we were heading towards. So we briefly put on shortwave radio and quickly had a listen just to find out what was going on. As we get closer to our final remote fuel outpost, the last place where we can get fuel, about 70 kilometres further on from Gardea, we find ourselves passing an abandoned old combi shell, which was a bit of a worry. Oh my goodness. And a little bit further on, past a strange little building, just a kilometre or so before the outpost. This strange little building here, I could only think it had some sort of religious influence. I don't know what it was there for. But of course, everything was unusual to us in this foreign culture, and we could obviously expect anything. But the road for the last 40 kilometres, oh man, it was just horrible. Pronounced corrugation, and we were going up and down like this. Oh, it was terrible. I tried everything to avoid the corrugation, but veering off the road, I mean, it just wasn't possible. You couldn't go off the road. Driving along the edge of the road didn't seem to make any difference. Driving slowly only made it worse. So our only course of action was we had to drive flat out, which made me a little bit on edge, because if we hit a large pothole at speed, well, you can only imagine the result. You know, going flat out there and hit a pothole, oh my goodness. You know, things were falling over everywhere inside the van, falling down and shaking loose, and the roof rack was nearly falling apart. There was mess everywhere, man. Cassette tapes bouncing off, and crockery and cutlery, and oh my goodness. But really, one could only find it laughable, really. The state of our combi, man, there was just stuff everywhere. It was a total shambles, oh my goodness. However, something totally unbeknown to us at that time was actually also an absolute potential for disaster, unbeknown to us, as we're negotiating this horrible road. In fact, it was something we wouldn't even become aware of until several days later. And oh my goodness, what a life-changing revelation it would become to us. A life-changing situation that had the potential for huge consequences with just a few days away. Oh my goodness.